Fill my mind and more. care of you. Every day.
From the air to the people, a master tale.
And if you act, if you wait, I will trust in time that we will meet again. If you act, let us spell out words. You chose to put them in order, didn't you? From their meaning the moment you tried to take me on.
I see something new on the horizon of my mind. I feel something new on the horizon of my heart. Let it slip away, moments of the past, memories will fade. Overcome the fear in my mind, overcome the pain. I wanna feel the sunset in my heart, in my veins. Shadows of my doubts melting in the rain, bringing on the change. I see something new on the horizon of my mind. I feel something new the horizon of my heart, I see something new. On the horizon of my mind, I feel something new. On the horizon of my heart,
I've been waiting, it's been playing on my mind. Hesitating, running out of time, Daydreaming of what could happen, what should happen. This feeling keeps confusing me, losing me. It's just too much, just let it be. Let it be. It's just too much, just let it be.
Light at midnight with fireflies and moonlight in the dark. We saw sparks fly with wide eyes, so we danced to goodbyes with open hearts. I wish I could turn back time. Just a memory to me, a memory so sweet that why? And I said
нет, сейчас должны ноги быть. Парни, без рофлов, нам нужно на двойку в и всем.
Поехали, 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 поехали.
Парни,
Я в
не
сливе,
умрите.
или нет? Смоки кидай, просто смоков.
Нам надо будет забирать.
Просто поживите, я вас заберу. Скажите, когда вас
за зону
забирать.
возьмем. За зону возьмем тачку. Пошли.
Инфу
На
дайте.
сесть
давай,
тачку,
давай.
на сесть тачку.
Давай, давай,
Я
давай,
могу-
бери.
Пошел?
Точно?
Да.
А, они сломали УАЗик нам.
Кирич, ты дойдешь до меня? Или мне тебя забрать?
Нет, он сдох.
Я вазик сяду, если он подарит.
Какой же ты гений!
Просто гений. Хорош, Даниш, хорош.
Хорош.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome. We are back for PCS Europe #1, and we are down to the wire. 2 more days to determine who is going to become our champion here in Europe. Welcome to my new world as well. Everything's changing around us. And I've got Martin and the Wind Blast himself with me as well, along for the ride. Martin, how are you doing, fella? It's been a few days.
It's been some days, yeah, and it's going to be some good days. We've had some super cool and interesting PCS in the other regions, and now I'm excited to get this finished off with our own region in Europe. So we're going to have some crazy good games, and I'm excited to see who's going to climb and who's going to fall.
Yeah, absolutely. Q confirm over in APAC. Spoiler alerts on all of this stuff. Shoot to Kill as well, doing fantastically over in America, just barely inching it out. Toby, of course, though, those regions are fantastic, but Europe is deep. We have got some of the very best teams here competing for the championship.
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy. I mean, even with Liquid somewhat ahead right now, 11 points ahead of ENCE, I have no way of telling you who's gonna end up winning this tournament. We could see teams sitting around 6th, maybe even all the way through 10th place, being able to turn things around here in the final 2 days.
Yeah, definitely. Here is the leaderboards as they do stand right now, and Team Liquid is back with a vengeance. They've got 93 points up towards the top. And a team that has really stood out to me whilst watching those first 2 days is ENCE, Martin. I'm really happy to see them back to some kind of form, or is it what do you think is kind of attributed to this? Is it luck, or are they back to where they should be really with the namesake that they hold?
I feel like they're coming together quite nicely in this. They obviously had 2 very good games, 3 very good games actually, or 4 you could say, depending on how far you deep. Like I feel like they're coming together quite nicely. They're not having that many bad games. They're mediocre games. They're managing to get some points with them and manage to salvage some good games. And overall, I feel like they're back in form. It might be the bad weather or the cold weather. It might be the summer. I don't know. It's kind of up and down for me with ENCE, but I feel like they're coming together quite nicely. I feel like they're finding the kind of pace as a roster as they should be with this kind of star-studded Finnish roster.
Yeah, a lot of big names up towards the top, Toby, but names that stick out to me that are not quite as common up towards the top that we're seeing here. Blaze and with potential. We also saw Nuclear Penguins get a win in that first day. Some of your boys doing well for themselves. They've fallen down a little bit since, though, but what are your thoughts?
No, I mean, I think Blaze is a good example of a team that might not have gone out completely slaughtering everyone. They do have a win under their belt for the tournament so far, but if you look at the average results, it hasn't been completely insane. They have just been able to always make sure to get points. They make sure to get into placement points, and if they don't, they always have the kills to kind of back up the lack of the placement points. So I think it's impressive to see what Blaze has been able to do against a set of teams of this caliber.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, when we look forwards into the future here, we're going to be starting things off on Miramar once again. Only 2 games of Miramar, correct? And then 3 games of Erangel for today. And the interesting thing that I want to take away from what we've seen from Miramar, as you take a look at our schedule here, bear in mind that it will be, as usual, an accelerated schedule. So, once we've got one game down, we're going to be going on to the next one. We're blasting through this here for the final. Martin, is that on Miramar so far, it's the big names that have come out on top. It's your phases, it's your TSMs, it's your Omicans. I think ENCE got themselves a win in there as well. Is Miramar now that map here in Europe where those big names feel ultra comfortable relative to even an Erangel, say?
I feel like Miramar is a map where the very good macro teams, the teams that are good at rotations, good at predicting circles, good at kind of spreading out with some greedy 2-2 splits and second, third circle. I feel like that's where our very top teams are doing very well. And coming around, obviously Nero Angel and everything, there's just so much more competition and closer competition. It's a lot easier to also get a rough circle on Erangel, and you're gonna have to send it. But I really feel like the top teams they've really gotten a good grip onto Miramar, and I think that's why we see those much. But on the other hand, you have a team like Tempus winning 3 games on Miramar. Obviously, it's slight luck as well that you're able to get some of the circles in a situation where you might not have gotten them, but. I feel like the very good teams that are grasping the kind of rotation strategy and macro strategy very well, I feel like it's those guys that are handling Miramar very well.
And notably, a name I didn't bring up before there, Toby, was Liquid when I was mentioning Miramar, but we can't forget them because across the 6 Miramars that they've played, they've got second 4 times. This is nuts. This is ludicrous, Toby.
I mean, they are by far the most consistent European PUBG team that we have right now. If we look and compare kind of the qualifier stage through to the finals that we're in now, Tornado Energy finished in first place, pretty impressive first place as well for the qualifiers. They're sitting in 10th right now. Tempus finished 3rd. They're in 15th. Redline 4th, down in 12th. Unity 5th and 14th. So, I mean, yes, while I know we can't take everything away from the qualifiers because once you're kind of guaranteed, you have a little more breathing room. You can slow down a bit. Liquid is the only team really that were up there in the qualifiers, that were up there doing the charity showdown, and now they're up there again here in the grand finals. And I think that's going to be scary for other teams because they are also one of the few teams that go aggressive. They get the compounds they want to get, and no one really seems to be able to contest them forward either.
That's fair. That's fair. And I want to go back to something that you guys were asked by Toffees on, I think, day 1, which was, were you able to call a winner? Were you able to call somebody who might stand out as the victor? Has that changed in your mind here, Martin, since the last weekend of play days? Because we've seen kind of things jostle around and some teams set them as, apart from some of the other teams. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Liquid is putting themselves quite nicely ahead also ends, but if we take Blaze at 4th, right? 65 points, all the way down to 12 with Redline, 53 points. It's 12 points difference. It talks to also how close our middle pack is and how big our middle pack is.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff can happen, like our 12 teams like Redline, they can go out and get you a 15 to 20 point game if they do very well, and they'll be all the way in the top 5 already. But I feel like Liquid is already putting themselves ahead. As you said, 4 second places. That consistency is really hard to find, and that's kind of Liquid-esque, you can also say. But we'll see. I mean, I feel like the guys that have put down their votes and pick'ems after our 2 first place, putting on Liquid is pretty solid. But we have, 2-3 others that are also sitting in a pretty solid points that can jump out and get a crazy good weekend here and get 80 points if they're doing very well.
Toby, your thoughts?
I think it's going to be hard. I mean, it's we haven't seen that one team in the grand finals yet really manage to separate themselves. While Liquid's been consistent, they haven't had the wins to back it up. They're sitting, as we've seen many times before, Liquid is sitting in first place without a chicken dinner yet, right? So they've been kind of caught up with by the chicken dinners that other teams have been able to get. And I mean, I don't know. I think the winner of today will be the team that conquers the edge. There are so many teams that try to play kind of Navi style, phase 4, phase 5, then you start making your way in. You can't have that many people on the edge for that long. If teams don't opt to go center earlier, if teams don't dare go aggressive and scout further forward earlier, you don't have room for that many teams on the edge. And I think that's kind of what messed up things for Navi on day 2 during the first week, that they were simply being contested in areas they never ever had to fight for before. So curious to see how things have changed, maybe, or how teams have kind of looked to do things different from last week to this week.
That's a good point that you bring up regarding Navi, because obviously when I was watching back day 1, I was like, damn, yes, Navi's back. This is going to be great. They didn't quite get themselves a chicken dinner on the board, but I thought the consistency was really there, Martin. And then, as you mentioned, Toby, day 2 didn't really go that well. Martin, do you think that Navi is going to be able to rise to the occasion again coming into these last 2 play days, or what are your thoughts?
I mean, a good Navi win will put, 20, 22 points on the board, and they're sitting on, 70, late 70s, 78 if they get a 22-point game, like a 12-kill. We've seen that before, and then they're straight back at it, honestly. But I feel like the consistency we're going to see from Liquid for the rest of these 10 games here, I feel like they're gonna show a good consistency, and they'll also get, maybe a chicken dinner or 2, maybe even. It would be rare if we wouldn't see that from them in a tournament like this. So we'll see. And I mean, at this point, if you're sitting in the middle pack in your 50s and 60s right now, 30 points is a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to argue with the consistency for Liquid. Even the 12th place that they got still had 6 kills, which doesn't take into the fact that there was then 4 second places and a 4th place with 5 kills. So kind of crazy to see. But just in general, Toby, coming into today, what did you take away from the first 2 days? Is there anything that you're looking out for in particular coming into these last 2 days where things now get really, really hectic and down to the wire?
I want to see a team separate themselves. Honestly, I think, I mean, EU is, if not the hardest, then close to the most difficult group of teams to predict, especially with these specific 16. You have had so many teams that have gone out and done well, so many teams that have had really, really massive games followed by double 0-point games. All of a sudden, that one good game has to kind of carry the points for the 3 games that you just played. That doesn't work, and I think that's why we see Liquid in first place right now, essentially without a win, right? I think, honestly, Europe is probably a region where I wouldn't be too surprised to see Liquid potentially winning the entire tournament without a single chicken dinner.
Yeah, it could happen. It's a weird thing to potentially happen, but it could definitely happen. You're right, Toby. Kind of final thoughts, Mike, before we actually go into our first Miramar of the day?
Yeah, you know what? I'm excited to see. Like a thought is how the teams are gonna be having to look back at the VODs. They're looking at how they're preparing themselves. I'm excited to see if they're gonna pick up some of the smaller stuff that both Toby and I we noted. Edge play versus center play, how center heavy it has been, and how much space has been on the edge versus other metas that has been around. So I'm excited to see how that's gonna play out today and how the changes are coming.
All right, and I'm happy to be back as well, guys. I'm excited because the first 2 days watching them back, I was sat back, I was like, damn, this is awesome. And now I get to be involved once again. And we are ready to go into our first game on Miramar. A huge thank you to everybody tuning in around the world. And thank you very much to Martin and Toby here to get things going, to start things off. We are going to the dynamic duo. It's Pansy. And make sure to tweet him at The Sims for all of the PUBG codes. It's The Sims.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, do make sure you head on to Twitter at The Sims, just to let you guys know. So thank you very much, James. Your apartment looks wonderful. Boys, let us know next time you decide to shut up so we can ignore it willingly rather than as now we're both in hoodies. But you guys will find that out after the game. What we do have is Miramar coming up, Rich. Now, something the Des didn't highlight that I want to look at is certain individuals not being on point. Now, I say this because some of the names towards the bottom side of kind of the frags out there are quite surprising. When I say names like Fuzzface, Bestalok, these sort of players, you think, they're your firepower. They're the players that you can depend on to get these kills in the bag. So far, they're all, sub 8 kills, if I'm not mistaken. towards the lower end of the entire board. Now, for most players, I give them benefit of the doubt, right, Rich? You give them a little wiggle room there, but these are household names. I'm a little worried if they don't turn it around. I'm looking at Besto there as a key factor for Na'Vi especially.
I totally agree with that. Like, Besto's performances that he's done before are the reason that Na'Vi sometimes sits so damn high, because he can be that lone ranger, because he can be that entry fragger and powerhouse that Na'Vi needs sometimes to get into positions that normally they wouldn't be able to, just because of his prowess. Like, his presence on a map, we spoke about before, can be quite daunting and can be quite scary. But we've not really seen that full resolution of him just yet. We've not seen the full firepower. Whether or not that comes this weekend or not, to be fair, it absolutely has to, because we've only got 2 days of games left, right? There's 10, and that's it. For Fuzzface, I'm a little bit more forgiving. There's a few times where he's kind of had to take up that, and this is just a personal opinion, that mantle role from what Mexi used to do, where it was be selfless players. Sometimes you'd see Mexi just throwing himself and all caution to the wind on a bit of a suicidal mission that there's no recovery from, to get the team into a better spot. Fuzz will happily take obscure angles to try and feed information back to the rest of FaZe, and you do need those selfless players that are more than happy to do that. Whereas you look at the opposite end when you've got Gustav, who's currently, I think, at the top of the board with the most travel time, or the most travel distance, should I say. It's the opposite end of the spectrum. You need these players that know their roles and they know exactly what they need to do to get the job done. For FaZe Clan, it's still 5th place, and it's a stone's throw from the top. All right, Liquid are there. And that comes down to, I think they're on 7 out of 10 games they've played thus far have been a top 10 finish, which is absolutely outstanding. And I need to back up what Toby said on desk. So far, they have been the most consistent team we've seen in Europe this year. They have...
Who's that? Is that again Liquid?
Liquid, by far.
Yeah,
like, we've seen a few poor performances here and there, but, hell, we do with other rosters. There's a few times where we question them and say, maybe they could have had a few more survive into the latter stage of the game. Maybe they could have done this, maybe they could have done that. But the underlining thing about them is their consistency. They're getting the points, they're getting up to those latter stages. You're always seeing Mexi in the end game. And with just a few bolts that they tightened up in last weekend by getting a few more players towards that late game, it's paid dividends. And I really think that they've tuned themselves up, and this is possibly one of the best teams that Liquid has so far fielded.
And I'm with you to a degree. When we say consistency, it's a hard thing to quantify. Now, you could argue their placements are good, but the one thing I want to kind of highlight with Liquid, at least in my mind, is they'll always make the best of whatever situation they're in. They're adaptable. I mean, the whole meme of Liquid rotations, we've seen the full scope of when it doesn't work, but I find I'm hard pressed to find a moment where I can critique them in their smaller level of play. So let's say, yes, they are just down to one player. Let's say they did get caught on a rotation here or there, which actually hasn't been much of a bother in this tournament, bear in mind, which might help that some of the teams closer to their drop spots simply aren't in this stage of the tournament. But the one thing I would like to say about them is that they always manage to get something. I've very rarely seen them dip out with no points. Whether it be one player, they'll scrap those 2 kills in, 3 kills in. There's always something they'll find, which is my highest accolade that I can put towards them, is they'll never walk out completely screwed over. And again, can we call that consistency? I guess that's where people want to debate. Would you rather a team that's always within, the top 6 finish, decent amount of kills, or do you want a team who can scrap together a good enough amount of kills to negate the fact that they might be now screwed over by a rotation? Again, for me, I like what Liquid are doing right now. I like the look of them. I think seeing what... And again, this is one that went wrong, right? The moment where you saw K-Mine pushing over the road, these aggressive plays to try and make something happen, they were in a huge disadvantage in that final scenario against TSM, and they still try to make a play happen with it. It's that they don't really want to quit, right? Like, that's something I quite like. And Northern Lights, another team I do want to look at, they certainly caught my attention as of late. 8th position, I'm not going to say that's good enough. After seeing how good they can be, I need to see more of that, Rich. Is that just me? Is that a fair placement for them? Is 8th good enough?
For Northern Lights, they kind of came into this one where it was not necessarily hit and miss, but it was an outstanding performance that we've not seen before. We started seeing Batulins on the interviews quite often, and the whole thing with the adorning the robe became a thing. Seeing him quite often on there in his robe and loving life. But yeah, they did have a bit of an outstanding performance, and it's not been that shining star so far, which can happen. I still think it's a solid roster. There is a few things that ain't necessarily going right this time round, but it also comes down to we have to start thinking now. I'll just be aware of what's going on here with Michael. Probably feeding a bit of information back to the team, knowing that temp is going to be up here. Michael, at the moment, is currently, I think, the top damage dealer. Literally, the bloke just
Michael's
shoots
been an
anything,
animal.
moves, breathes. Not necessarily the top fragger in the entire lobby, but when it comes to damage, he'll happily just shoot anything. And that helps his teammates out, being able to pick up those frags when they're damaged. And more importantly, just batter people away. But yeah, for it's going to go back to Northern Lights. It's an interesting one, and I don't really know. I can't say just yet. You will get teams that now and again have these outstanding performances, and things will just go as well as they can be. Whether or not people, because you got to think, Lauren, how many games we've been playing now this year online, quite close together, you know, from Charity Showdown into this, with the huge, long-ass group stage that we've had. People will begin to figure out your nuances. People will be able to figure out your...
Oh, hold on, Rich.
what
We've
you
got
like to
two
rotate.
bubble teams. We've got the Penguins and at least Batulans getting very close by here, and I'm wondering where the rest of Northern Lights currently reside, because he's going to hear all of this, and I don't know if they're going to pull up over here or if they're going to keep going on. Scooby could be in trouble if Batulans gets an eye on this, just because he is the last man of the whole squad. He'd happily take that, but it looks like actually that's gone pretty fine for now. Obviously, they aren't in the current circle. They're still on the outskirts. This is over by Power Grid. So their plan is probably, you know, focus on what's in front of them. And again, for you guys playing along at home, the circle is kind of slap bang centralizing on Los Leones right now. So that's kind of to remind yourself of it. Most people are heading down that way. All but the Penguins, Northern Lights, and Na'Vi are in the current circle.
This is why they'll take up residences in some of these buildings, because you're not necessarily knowing at this stage where it could be pushing to. We know we have water in play, but that'll come into effect later down the line, so it's not something to worry about just yet. It'll always be in the back of your mind, that's for sure, but certainly for now, it's getting an eye on where this next circle goes and seeing which position you're going to be best be in. Unity decide, okay, well, with the one player over here of Orange, we'll just bail on this one, give it up. For certain circumstances like this, depending where you are on the map, you kind of question your team and you ask the IGL, do I stick it out here? Do I fight this one and keep them at bay? Or do we regroup? Do we stick as a four-man stack? TSM's doing exactly that. TSM currently, I think they're doing pretty damn well so far. I've been quite happy. Same goes with ENCE. We're starting to see the return of a lot of the old, guard, but certainly where we'd expect teams of this caliber to be located on the leaderboard. You know, ENCE, TSM, FaZe Clan up there, Liquid top. I mean, hell, it's starting to be the battle of the bands up there. Michael holding point for a second because he knows that if he takes this shot, he then may open himself up to FaZe Clan, who clearly has a read on where they are situated in. So I'm just peek over and take a quick glance. He has to get this, because if he doesn't, everyone else just open fires on him. He either fights one team in front of him or one team behind. Is he going to take it? Yes, he does. Gets the dink straight to the head. That's a 2-tap. Out of the car we go. Instant nade.